Hello and welcome. I'm Richard Bleasdale, and today I'm really happy to be bringing to you an episode of Campaign Asia's Creation Stories. Creation Stories is a video series where we look to discuss with talented marketers and their agency partners, I guess, the stories behind some of the best work that we're seeing across the region. So today we're starting with an amazing campaign, which is called Good Morning World, which is from Tourism New Zealand and their agency partner Special Group. And I'm really happy to welcome to the call today, firstly from Tourism New Zealand, Jill Chestnut. Jill is the Global Brand and Content Manager, Head of Global Brand and Content for Tourism New Zealand. Hi, Jill. How are you?
I'm good, Richard. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Not at all. Thanks for joining us. And joining Jill is Tony Bradbourne, who is the CEO and Chief Creative Officer for Special Group in New Zealand. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good to be joining you guys.
Thank you very much for both of you for joining us. We're really looking forward to an interesting conversation about what is a fascinating campaign. So we're going to start the call by having a look at the work. So I'm just going to share screen and we will have a look at a video which shows the Good Morning World campaign and how it came to life.
Good morning, world. I hope you had a good night's sleep. I'm here at beautiful Mangawhai Heads, one of my favourite spots. One thing that's special about New Zealand is that we're one of the first countries in the world that gets to see the sun every day. So we thought, since we're up already, how about have one of us Kiwis say good morning to the world every single day for a year? You know, a little welcome from us to you.
Good morning, world.
Good morning, world.
Good morning, world.
Good morning, world. I'm here in Rotorua.
Just about to have my morning bath.
Welcome to a beautiful, sunny old Kaikoura. Here we are at Ninsbin with a couple of beautiful, fresh crayfish.
Kia ora, welcome to Hobbiton. As you can tell, amazing, beautiful, magical place.
We've just abseiled down about 300 feet.
I'd like you to introduce you to Hokianga, and this is where we do mean bombs.
So favourite part of the river, well, you've got to actually say one of the best parts is down here at the Otamohiki stream where you've got hot water flowing in, so you can cruise down, pull over, have a bathe. Absolutely magical.
This morning, I'll be going for a ride on this beautiful thing.
And you know, you can even get married up here.
What happens, it creates hot water, and we can dig a hole, we fill it up, and have some fun.
My favourite way to kick off the day. Go with me sometime.
We've got mountain biking, we've got everything you need.
I hope you're enjoying your morning.
Come and check out how epic it is down here sometime.
I hope you have an amazing day wherever you are. Come on.
Fantastic campaign, just incredible that it sort of runs every single day for 365 days. I'm going to start the conversation, Tony, with you and just ask if I can as kind of way of introduction. What's the background to and the story behind Special Group and Tourism New Zealand working together?
Well, we have been working with Tourism New Zealand for a number of years. We did a campaign really targeting backpackers in Germany and Europe and things like that called Backpackergram, and which was a really interesting way of actually using, the channel's Instagram in particular, as the name suggests, to actually really target these audiences and the channels that they kind of live in. And then following from that, about probably a year after that campaign aired, we were asked by Tourism New Zealand to have a look at the big global campaign of what to do. So that's really where we dove into it. And the start of this was basically probably about a 2.5 year long campaign started.
Right. Fantastic. And so that's great, because that kind of leads us into this work specifically. And maybe Jill, if I could ask you just to give us a bit of a background to this particular project? You know, what was the situation for Tourism New Zealand from a commercial perspective and brand and so on?
I guess we went through a bit of an exercise probably back sometime in around 2018, when we really started to notice that across the board with our key markets, we were starting to see our brand metrics decline quite universally. So that was kind of something. And so when we did a piece of research, one of those pieces of research was around looking at what the competition were doing. And it was really clear that we just weren't distinctive enough. You know, if you put us and our work against, you know, the likes of Iceland or Canada, same epic landscapes. And so we weren't, in the eyes of the consumer, different or distinct. And we'd kind of really, we'd become way too rational in our communications, and we'd lost that kind of magic.
Okay.
So we did a really big piece of work to talk to consumers and really understand from their perspective what they felt made a holiday to New Zealand unique. And when we went through that big piece of work, what we realized is that a massive part of the magic of coming to New Zealand, and a massive surprise for consumers, is, of course, they come for the landscapes, but they leave talking about the Kiwi that they met that invited them to a barbecue, or helped them on their way, or showed them their sort of favorite spot, or went out of their way to make sure that they had a really great time. And that was really missing from all of our brand comms, and was a big reason why we kind of shifted from this quite rational place, which we knew wasn't serving our purpose, not making us distinct anymore. There's much more emotional space with, you know, our amazing Kiwis at the heart. You know, it was a big change for us as an organisation. But yeah.
So really very much research led in terms of the challenge, and then kind of how that needed to translate into strategy.
So the consumer research was a sort of big part of that. And then obviously Māori culture being another unique part of what makes New Zealand special. And so we spent a lot of time working with sort of our cultural consultants to try and really uncover some of the values that really are important to us as Kiwis, and how they, I guess, permeate someone's holiday. And so we rebuilt our brand strategy based on those kind of core truths of what really makes New Zealanders unique. And we kind of landed on 3 core values that really started to underpin our new global brand strategy.
Cool, I get you. That's fantastic. So having developed that sort of research and the insights and so on, how did you then go into the briefing stage with the agency? How do you because you know, the magic, I always think in these sort of amazing campaigns, needs to kind of start at the briefing stage. So how did you go through that sort of briefing stage? How do you approach that sort of thing?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is that we actually did the briefing in Sydney.
Wow, okay.
And Tony can probably talk a bit more about this, but the briefing was done in Sydney, and that sounds counterintuitive, but actually Australia is our biggest global market. Right. So the reason that we kind of love working with Special is because they have this Trans-Tasman team, and they have offices here in New Zealand and Australia and now in other parts of the world. But at the time, it was really important for us to get an Australian lens over it. So having Australians, actually creative team, working with Kiwi creative teams together. And I do genuinely believe that's where a lot of the magic kind of came from, being able to see the country a bit more objectively. So Tony, you might want to elaborate on that. But
yeah, that was, you've summed it up so well there. I mean, like, the briefing did happen in Special in our Sydney office. Over some wine, a bit of tea, as you do in New Zealand. But it was that crucial thing, is we wanted an outside lens looking back at New Zealand, as well as all of this cultural understanding from a New Zealand point of view. So if we could put both those together, we thought we could use all the best brains from our group and try and come up with something that was really going to leave a dent, that really was going to make a difference and be something that was quite different.
That's cool. And that's a really, I mean, from a consumer perspective, that's a really nice way of attacking it. Do you have a way of briefing that's specific to how you brief? Do you have a sort of, a kind of approach?
I don't think so. I think that we do take a lot of time. A brief often ends up on a couple of pages of paper, and that is the summation of months of thinking and research and genuine sort of insight. So what you kind of get on those 2 pieces of paper should be a really short, sharp summary of actually what is a huge amount of depth that sits behind it. But yeah, no, I think, I don't know, probably one for Tony to answer back to say what would make it unique.
I think it's got to start with a really, really good relationship, and it's got to be honest and open. And so any briefing, it's not just taking the page, but words on the page. It's really asking as many questions as you can to really, really try and understand the challenge and the thinking behind it, and to understand the ambition of an organisation like Tourism New Zealand. So, but it's a really proud moment to be able to market your country is kind of the ultimate brief, really. So, so we were pretty excited. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to both of the points you've made there as well, that thought about the understanding the client organization's ambition for the work, because I think one of the things about these sorts of big briefs is they have to really paint that ambition, but they also have to inspire the agency at the end of the day to kind of lift its sort of thinking as high as possible.
One of the other things that you guys did is you actually took a bit of a trip around, to New Zealand, one of the sort of tourism hubs. And I do think that you can't sort of underestimate the value of immersing yourself. We just happen to be a tourism brand, but that's sort of really vital to put yourself in the picture and of, how the consumer experiences or sees your brand and ultimately us as a destination. So I think the team had some fun when they were.
Yeah, if there's ever an opportunity that says, hey, you can justify getting all the teams from Sydney, all the teams from Auckland, and flying down to Queenstown, and just really all of us concentrating on this challenge and putting away all the other distractions that happen so much in your day-to-day, and just really trying to experience and understand it was really key. It was really funny as well, because we landed at Queenstown and then we wake up the next morning and snow had fallen across everything, and it was just like it was like come on, the place was kind of like showing off. It was trying to inspire us, but it was an incredibly productive time. We really, at that stage there, we knew what our broad strategy was. We knew how we were going to be judging work. It had to generate attention. It had to really leave a dent, because we don't have the biggest budget in the world, so the work really has to really stand out. And so I think we worked down there for about 3 days solidly, and we must have come up with about 100 different ways to actually execute the strategy that we had then. And then we just brought all them down. We got to about the 3 best ideas the teams had, and then we took them back into Auckland, and then we really just stress tested them.
Okay, and so that's great, because then you're starting to talk about kind of what you did with the brief, and by the sounds of things, one of the interesting things that sounds like you really attacked, which I think is a brilliant idea, is a sort of experiential way of kind of absorbing the brief and kind of, like you say, experiencing, I guess, what the tourist or the consumer is really going to experience. There can't be many better places to do that than Queenstown, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. It was also just, getting all of the teams, all the best talent you can get together is an amazing thing to do. It's I'd love to do it on every single brief, but unfortunately we can't. But it was really good to have those Australian teams, and within the Australian teams there is multiple different cultures and ethnicities, and likewise from the New Zealand team. But for us to be able to kind of hothouse it, or call it whatever you want to do in terms of the way we did it, it is a great way to creatively work, for you all to focus on how good this piece of work can do, and everyone building on top of everyone else to try and make ideas, even if they're not your ideas, as good as they can possibly be.
Cool. And so from that initial process, you talked about sort of coming back with maybe 3 ideas or 3 directions, and then you were starting to you said stress test. What do you actually do at that point? What actually happens? How do you sort of stress test, I guess?
Well, actually, what we did for all three different directions we took in there, we created a video. And this video is it's pitched 6 months or 12 months into the future, and it tells the entire story of this campaign.
Wow, okay.
How it launches, what mediums you see it in, how it appears in different markets, and then what the reaction will be. We really go all the way through and imagine everything from how much engagement we get into it, how people react to it, how much PR it will generate, all of these things. And then if we condense that into 3 minutes and you can click and play each one of these different ideas, it's the best way to really bring it to life in such a succinct and powerful way.
Would you say that those ideas, just out of interest, are they sort of more strategic sort of platforms, or are they kind of creative executional ideas?
They were all three creative executional ways off the one platform that we had.
Cool, I get you.
Yeah. So the platform we had was just evolving really 100% pure New Zealand, which has been around for, I think, almost 20, 30 years, and it's become one of the most iconic tourism marks. But by saying 100% pure New Zealand, what had been done previously was, we'd fallen into the trap of showing this incredible country, but these very, vast landscapes with hardly any people in them. So the strategy was to twist it slightly and say 100% pure welcome, and to really show that welcoming experience that you get when you come here. That's another interesting thing is when it's all around you, you just kind of think it's what happens, and you don't think anything of it. So getting that overseas insight was really important, that actually, no, when you come to New Zealand, it is different from where we're coming from. So all three were just creative executions of how do we prove that when you come to New Zealand, you do get this amazing sense of welcome every day, everywhere you go, and every interaction with every Kiwi. So they were three creative ideas to show and make people sit up and take notice of the welcome that you'd receive when you come here.
Cool. Okay. Fantastic. So we're then at the point of three creative directions, I guess, and you presumably you're now at the point of sharing them with the client group. So tell us a little bit how that was done. How did you actually share the ideas with the clients?
Well, at that stage there, it was down to the end, and we just brought all of the TNZ team into special here in Auckland, and we went through the strategic setup. It was supported with consumer research and on the ground films to actually prove that this actually does happen every single day in New Zealand. There's some incredible stories of we found all different tourists in New Zealand. We got them to tell their stories of what's it like to be in New Zealand. And there were people who had ferry tickets brought for them, or got offered a room for the night, or keys to their car for a week, or their batch for a weekend. And so as soon as you kind of see this, it actually gives you a lot of interesting material to work with from a creative point of view. So we all gathered back at special. There's more wine, more cheese, obviously. And then after we got to the strategy, we played the three different ways that we thought we could grab the world's attention on what is our forever challenge, that we've only got 0.3%, of the world's global tourism marketing spend. So these ideas really do have to really leave a dent.
Yes, fair enough. So cool. So we're hearing the presentation from the agency's perspective. So then, Jill, I guess from the client perspective, how was that presentation? What was it like? Did it feel? Was there any tension? Was there any? How was it received?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's always really sort of easy to look at an idea and think, you see it out in the wild, and there's a lot that kind of goes on behind the scenes, particularly with an organisation as complex as Tourism New Zealand, with as many stakeholders in as many different countries with lots of different cultures. So the brief is tough from the beginning, and so I think what we were always looking for, I think there was a clear standout for us right from the get-go. We all loved Good Morning World.
Right.
It was pretty scary, the thought of could have killed a million times over to we've got a very small budget by comparison. We don't have the luxury of being able to buy eyeballs, or we have to think differently. And so when the agency is presenting an idea to say, hey, do you want to film a different piece of content every single day of the year? But for us, it just felt bigger than advertising. It felt like a genuine gesture to an active demonstration of what we were trying to do. It put Kiwis at the heart of it. And I think just there's an immediate sort of gut reaction to seeing work like that. Of course, it has to stack up, strategically. And there are lots of other things that, you need to make sure are right. But at the core of it, we just absolutely loved it. And we just felt different from the start. It felt scary and it felt really different. And we were just excited. We were excited by it. But, that's not to say there weren't, lots of hurdles. There was one meeting where, somebody in the room said that fine to go ahead, but you cannot say good morning world on it. And do you really need to do it 365 days? And what if we just did 50? Would that be the same? And, so, you have to keep fighting, for the parts of the idea. We used this discussion a little bit recently, where we talk about the glass, the things that if you change, break the idea, and the clay. So the things if you mold or adapt that just make the idea better. So,
that's a really nice analogy, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of talk a little bit about that. Not doing it every day for the year was the glass. Of course, if this is a gesture, we've got to do all 365 days. So there were a lot of hurdles to get through. And I remember, there was one meeting where we got all 3 original ideas back up on the wall and said, are we sure we're picking the right idea here? When you have so many different stakeholders, and when you put, the other 2 ideas back up on the wall, it was clear as night and day that we were really in a good place with Good Morning World. So we forged on.
Cool. So there's some fantastic insights there. So a couple of things that you mentioned that just, if I can ask a little bit more on. One of the things that when I talk to a lot of marketers about the best work that they're doing, they always talk about this concept of it being a little bit scary. And I think for all marketers, that's a very challenging concept. For a government-funded organization, even more challenging, I would say. So how do you bridge that sort of what's kind of good scary, what's kind of bad scary? How do you bridge that sort of divide?
Well, I think for me, we knew that we had a really strong foundation in our strategy, and the work was just a really clear demonstration of that. The scary piece for us was not that the idea was wacky or it felt, like risky. It was just that, holy moly, this is going to be a real undertaking. How are we going to, it was more the how are we going to do this rather than this feels off or, not right for our brand. So I think that there's kind of scary, this feels hard. How are we going to do this? And those are the things that you tackle together. If you're feeling like this is scary because it feels totally wrong for our brand, or it doesn't quite, doesn't sort of ladder up to the strategy, that's a very sort of different conversation. But for us, we never felt that. We knew that it stacked up. We just didn't really know if we could execute it, was probably part of the challenge. So, I think lots of people at that point would put it in the too hard basket, and it would never see the light of day, because it does sound hard, and we
incredibly hard, actually.
We didn't
in reality.
Yeah. So we had to think differently.
So then the second thing that you said, which I mean, kind of is in the same territory, is you talked about one meeting where someone said, we can't say Good Morning World, and should we just do it for 50 days of the year? How do you get through that? How do you retain the concept and not, because one of the things that we see a lot is a great idea can get watered down and becomes a moderate or a weaker idea when it actually gets to market. How do you stay true to what's being presented? I
think, we can credit the agency for a lot of that. I think that's the other thing, is that you have to have an agency that's going to tell you how it is, is going to say you're making a mistake, or it is going to not make the work strong enough. And, I appreciate it. If the agency are willing to walk away from it because it's gonna break the idea, then that's kind of okay. But they don't want to make bad work, and neither do we. And so I think part of it is having an agency who are willing to stand up for and fight for what they believe in is massively important, to get you to sort of recheck yourself. And that was what happened. We all got back in a room, we spent a day together thrashing it out and really making sure we knew what we were committing to, what was important, what would break this idea if we didn't keep that part of it on the table. And we got to a set of really clear commitments with each other. I think Rory, the planner, still has it behind his desk. So, because it was such a momentous day where we were all aligned. Like, these are the things that are non-negotiable. Here are the things that we can change. And just being really clear about that together as a team. So that's not my job. That's not the agency's job. You have to agree on that together, and you have to be able to have tough and honest conversations.
Fair enough. Tony, do you want to build on that in terms of maybe the tenants that are sitting behind the planner's desk?
Well, it is interesting because you mentioned light of day, and I see an idea, and I realized that, this is so funny because, this was 2.5 years ago. But if we looked at the truth of the idea, and that's where the light of day phrase comes into it, because we had an insight, which is New Zealand is the first country in the world to see the sun each day. And that whole idea of, because we were up, a couple of hours earlier than everyone else, what could we do to show our welcome? And it was, what a better, more natural thing to do than to say good morning world and wish the world a good day, etc. So if you've got that tenant there, that truth there, first in the world to see the sun, we say good morning to everyone to hope that try and get the world up on the best side of the bed they possibly can get out of. Then you've got a truth to it. It's not like this is just a creative whim. This is actually the sort of truth of the matter. And as soon as you've got those truthful tenets to lean back on, you can really progress forward. So, but with that came difficulty, because one of the things we agreed is that we could only shoot in the morning. We weren't going to fake this. We weren't going to shoot in the afternoon.
Wow.
That would not be a good morning world.
It wasn't hard enough. So we made it.
Wow.
So on top of having to create 365 executions, we could only create them in the morning of any shoot day, which is difficult because you want to travel around a lot. You want to see as much of New Zealand as possible. So that made it more difficult. And even more difficult was that it was a leap year. So we actually had to make 366.
Of course. Yeah. So I mean, that's great because you everyone's on board. The idea's sort of been bought and sold, I guess, if you like. You've agreed your tenants about how you're going to operate. But then, as is always the case, you get into the execution of the idea. And Tony, you're already mentioning one hugely challenging, I guess, kind of standard that you set yourselves in terms of, you'll only shoot in the morning. But what else happened in the creative execution process and the production process? I'm sure there are stories.
Yeah.
How did you maintain, I guess, the integrity of the idea, but also the quality in terms of production?
Yeah, so there were real rules. And if you look at them all, how could you make 365 different pieces of content feel very consistent? And you'll see that there's various rules that happen. We've got real central framing in the middle of it. So the person's always in the middle of it. And this is because we didn't want to do multiple cuts in it. We tried to avoid cuts as much as possible because we wanted it to feel that you were just standing there in front of this person. This was a genuine conversation from a Kiwi that you were standing right in front of. Mm-hmm. It was also because of the different formats from Instagram, square, verticals, horizontals, and where different graphics had to go. We always had to have that person in the middle. So that was one way to make it consistent. The second way was every single piece started with good morning world. And then you could go on to talk about who you are, where you are, what you like about this part of New Zealand. What do you hope, or what do you want to say to the world? You've got several billion people watching you. What do you want to say? Is it hope you have a great day, or I'm sorry about this, or if you come down here, give me a phone call? So there was those ones there, and then we'd always finish with 100% pure welcome, 100% pure New Zealand. So once you've got these are the things that happen over and over again, you work out that's our shooting style and that's our look. Then you have to work out how you can possibly create what ended up being, if you put it end to end, was 3.5 feature films worth of content that we had to create.
Wow.
I guess worth noting that, well, firstly, we didn't have enough budget. So that was the first thing. We sort of bought into it, and then quickly realized that we wouldn't be able to film all of them. And so we took a leap of faith and handed it over to Kiwis. You know, once we started working and filming, we encouraged Kiwis to do their own films, and it was amazing.
Oh, wow. Okay, right. Yeah. So you got contributions from New Zealanders.
You know, and we're lucky that we have relationships with tourism operators and you know, that weren't included in the filming round, but wanted to be part of the campaign. So they would send us their films, and we would edit them. And you know, I got a contact for Sam Neill, and I thought, well, you don't ask, you don't get if you don't ask. So I emailed him, and a couple of weeks later, I got a film back from his agent that him and his duck Charlie filmed in their vineyard. And so you know, we were lucky that we were able to really get, I think, sort of Kiwis sort of got behind the idea, and yeah, we had so many films submitted. So you know, but that was a big sort of leap of faith, and nothing was scripted. So that's also quite scary, you know, for us. What are people going to say? Are they, you know, is this going to make sense? And you know, some films were better than others. You know, there were some that we couldn't use, and that's okay. You know, we got some brilliant ones as well. So
yeah, fantastic. And I think interesting to the, you know, the point that you're making around budgets. I think most marketers and agencies will always identify with that. They're never, you know, what is enough money to do something? It's very, very hard to say, but taking that sort of leap of faith with the work and opening up to allow consumers to, or not in this case consumers, but New Zealanders to take part in the campaign is super powerful as well.
Well, we had to completely break the mold. You know, this isn't your traditional production. This isn't 3 trucks worth of gear and you know, your grips and your the lighting. This was a really nimble crew. I think we sometimes had a director, we sometimes didn't. We had someone behind the camera, you know, a DOP, we had and a producer, and that was it. You know, we were so light on the ground, filming 3 films every day, sometimes 4. And we really were strict with ourselves. You know, midday was the cutoff. That was when for us it was afternoon, and we weren't being true to the concept. We're bonkers, I know, but that was what we did. And you know, the agency for us, you know, was so amazing at helping us figure out what that model could look like, so we could achieve that dream. You know, this was never going to work with a traditional kind of production model, so we did have to think differently.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we should really talk about that, because not only did we have to get a film company that was really, really willing to work differently, but we had to work differently as an agency, and collaboration was never more important on it. We had the Tourism New Zealand team were being creatives, and all the different teams from Special were playing the role of clients as well. So, and we tag teamed as well. So it was broken into 4 major production blocks based on season. We basically pulled apart the bottom part of the agency here and turned it into a massive viewing suite. And once they started coming in, you know, just the enormity of the amount of edits you have to look at, because whilst there were 360 6 films, by the end of each one of them we were choosing between, you know, which was the best take out of 8 different takes. So if you do the math on that,
sure,
it's a lot of stuff to go through, but we really just collaborated and just worked as one total team. There were no real walls between client and agency. It was great. You know, these guys would come in for a 3-hour stint, and we would all sit down and we'd just go through them all, and we would just all collectively say which one moved us the most, or which one made us smile, or which one made us chuckle the most. Yeah, so great.
It was so fun. I still kind of miss those days where we all kind of got together and spent all that time in the edit suite. I think we had over 2,000, maybe almost 3,000 bits of content at the other end.
Wow.
Once you kind of factor in translations and formats, etc. So there was a lot of spreadsheets.
Fair enough. So you're I guess you're sort of touching on the final sort of conversation area to a certain extent, which is around, in some respects, that kind of hackneyed area of major learnings from this campaign. It sounds particularly here the way of working between the marketing group and the agency group was very, very kind of nimble and flexible.
Yeah, that's probably the only way to describe it. Really, is everyone just had to roll their sleeves up and believe in the idea and make it as good as we can. And it was, there was friends and friends of friends involved, or someone who knew someone over there. It was really reaching out to all of the regional tourist operators and the like that Jill mentioned before, and just trying to get everyone on board. But there's such an overwhelming, I think, want for New Zealanders to be able to like welcome the world. I think it was the proof of the concept was that there were so many Kiwis who just wanted to say good morning world and wish the world all the best for the day. So it was a lot of fun because of that.
Fair enough. And Jill, from your perspective, any kind of key learnings, new experiences?
I think that putting an idea doesn't sail through a business, rarely. You have to, as a marketer, be prepared to fight for it at every stage of the process. And I think, something that I try and think about is sort of, it's really easy to peck apart an idea, death by 1,000 cuts, and you have to think like, how are we going to do this? Not why not, or how is this not going to work? So it's always like, how are you going to add to this? How are we going to do this? Not why should we not do this? And so there were so many times where we as a team, it just felt really overwhelming. And I think, this sounds a bit trite, but it was just bites of the elephant. We just had to keep chipping away at it to get it to where it was. And it took a year. We lived and breathed this. We were in pre-production when we were in post-production. We were, scouting when we were editing, and it was just a full-time machine for a year. And we had so much fun doing it.
As an outsider looking in, it clearly comes through in the work. It's such an incredibly fresh and big and different campaign, and it's clearly so true to the brand and the experience. I think that the tourists get in New Zealand. I think it really is very, very, very true.
Yeah, I think just also from my perspective is always, I'd really hate I hate being called the client, and I hate sort of this client agency word. I always am like, don't call me the client, because it just, you can't behave like that when you're in a project like this. You just become, I know it sounds cliche, but we're an extension of each other's team. We were in each other's pocket 24/7, and that is sometimes what it takes to make it happen.
Yeah, I think they always say, don't they, that the best work comes from the best relationships, and it always does. And if that sort of relationship's working extremely well, it tends to come through in the work quite strongly, I think. Okay, well, I think that was a wonderful session. Fantastic work, amazing insights about the story behind the campaign coming to life. So firstly, Jill from Tourism New Zealand and Tony from Special Group, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Thank you.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thanks for giving up your Wednesday evening.
No worries.
Okay, so thanks very much, guys, for that. This is Richard Bleasdale signing off from Campaign Asia's Creation Stories. We'll be back again soon with another inside look into the stories behind some of the best work that's happening across the region. Thank you very much, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.